As I was saying, I like to think of Read or Die predominantly as a research team, individual scholars coming together, presenting that information, and also asking critical questions. So in this final presentation, this will be book review PowerPoint presentation. And how we do these presentations, particularly this one, is through Q&A. So anytime you feel like you want to go ahead and ask a question about that, feel free to do so. So as I'd like to pass the literature around, so everybody get a chance to browse through the pages. So if you want to pass this around. This is The Secret Life of Plants, authored by Peter Tomskin and Christopher Bird. Now, as we all know, and taught in elementary school and other educational institutions, is that, of course, plants essentially provide our oxygen and food for both man and beast. Okay? So they go through this miracle process of photosynthesis. Now, what's so interesting about The Secret Life of Plants is that this literature literally explains that plants are in fact parallel to humans and other biological existences. Not only parallel to these animals as well as humans, but even far more superior in the senses that they are given innately. So what we'll come to find out is even on the meat-eating level, we have over 500 varieties of carnivorous plants that devour living creatures. Now, these particular plants that do this, most likely in swampy lands, when they are unable to obtain nitrogen in these particular ways. So what happens is that they use cunning methods in which they trap these particular prey and they devour them, taking everything, the meat and the blood, and leaving the skeleton. Okay, let's go to the next one. So what we're trying to expand in Read or Die is putting out the correct information. Okay, so what we come to find out is that the traditional perspective that plants are a senseless automata, meaning that they're just there, and there's no life here. When in actuality, that is the exact opposite. What we come to find out is that the perception of these plants are able to hear inaudible sounds that we cannot hear with the human ear. And they are able to even perceive colors of wavelengths which are invisible to the human eye as well. Now, I bet you're wondering, well, how do they know this information? How are they able to analyze this still form of life and gather these analyses? What they do through the galvanometer. Now, what's so distinctly different about the galvanometer is that it's a branch of the polygraph, which is a lie detector. So what they do is they attach these electrodes onto the leaves of these plants, and the galvanometer, which was named after the Italian physicist, Luigi Galvani. Okay? Now, what we come to find out is that the person who actually invented it was Maximilian S.J. Hale. And he was a court astronomer for the Empress Maria Theresa. Now, what we have to come to find out is that on the galvanometer, there's a particular chart where there's electrical current running through the actual paper, keeping note of the emotional interaction of these particular plants. Now, let's go to the next slide. So, we had a particular scientist who was specialized in lie detectors, and what he did was, in order to get enough emotional jump through the galvanometer, the best way to do that is to threaten the object, and as well as ask critical questions and see what the chart moves upon. So what the scientists decided to do is that they would burn a particular leaf to which the electrodes was attached. Now, before he even actually did the act, the instant he got the image of the flame in his mind, already we see this upward sweep that occurred on the galvanometer. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So in chapter 1 here, we're dealing with plants and ESP, this extra perception that they are able to perceive. Now, what we come to find out is later, as he went through the motions of pretending, he would burn the leaf. There was no reaction whatsoever. The plant appear to be able to differentiate between real and pretended intent. Okay, let's go to the next slide here. Not only that, but plants also, according to the galvanometer, had increasingly movements, even through sudden appearances of a dog or a human who didn't have their well-being in mind. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so what we come to find out is through these particular observations, we come to find out is that the plant and its keeper initiate in a particular bond, where these plants are able to even feel the emotional urges in the human. And we're going to expand further into that. Not only that, but during danger or damage. For example, if we were to rip a piece of leaf off a plant, we'll come to find out is that the plant are similar to animals and humans in the sense that they either pass out or go into a deep sleep prior to this act to occur. So, according to these studies, the plants already know that we have a particular negative intent, and thus they go through this succession of consciousness. So, plants appear to maintain a link with that person no matter where they went, even among thousands of people. Now, the literature talks about a specific experiment where one scientist went on Times Square during New Year's Eve and goes everything from running underground, almost getting hit by a car, and all these emotional switches. And as he went back to the lab, he found that the 3 plants that were being observed on the galvanometer independently showed these emotional switches. Now, how he did that was he carried a notepad with him and a stopwatch. Now, once he did that, he would click every time that he would have an emotional fracas. And the plants were able to pick up on it. So, to even further analysis, we know through certain experiments, we continue to experiment until it's proven not accurate. Now, what one of the particular scientists did was, through a female occupant, what he did was, he asked her to get on a plane ride over about 700 miles. And what they came to find out is that even through these far distances, the plants were still able to perceive the emotional connection. Okay? So what we begin to come to find out is that we need to understand is that there are other forms of consciousness that are around us. So we cannot simply rely on the 5 senses. There's much more. So one day, when the particular scientist cut his finger, immediately on the polygraph / galvanometer, there was immediate reaction that we see according to the chart. And what particular scientist is saying is that the plant was able to recognize the death in the living cells. Now, due to the death in these particular living cells, the scientists are speculating that the actual plant has a consciousness and an emotional connection with all forms of life. So when something happens and a person dies or any form of emotional connection, we see certain emotional changes through these particular plants. Now, another example of that is New Jersey's cytologist, Dr. Howard Miller. And he concluded that there is a cellular consciousness that must be common to all life. And we see that even when these individuals pour hot water into the tank, into a particular sink, and what happens is, we know that hot water kills a certain amount of germs. So what even in this small, minute processes that we just, unconsciously run our water and so forth, the plants are able to perceive that and recognize that there is a death occurring here. Okay, let's go back to that previous one. Now, another experiment by Vivian Wiley in her garden, she picked 2 leaves of a particular plant. And in her bedroom, with this particular plant, what she would do was to give it positive thoughts and want it to live and speak certain mantras to this particular plant, or a particular leaf, excuse me. And with another one, she placed it in a different room. Now with that particular leaf, she said negative things, it wasn't about promoting that life. just to distinguish the difference. And what we come to find out is that when she called the scientists in order for them to take photographs, we come to find out is that the one that she gave most of the love and positive words to was more lively, more green, as if it was just plucked. Now when we look at the other leaf, in the other room, it was flaccid and broken up. So what this is also showing is that even our words are on a particular wavelength that will help promote health, not only in plants, but in us. We have another literature by Dr. John Diamond, and he has a particular literature called Life Meridians. And in this literature, he has an actual graph where each word, like aim,